In the heart of northeastern Africa, a colossal structure is emerging that promises to reshape not just Ethiopia, but the entire continent. Meet the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Africa's largest hydroelectric dam, currently under construction on the Blue Nile River in Ethiopia. At 1,800 meters long and 175 meters high, the dam is set to generate over 6,000 megawatts of electricity annually, potentially transforming Ethiopia into one of Africa's largest electricity producers. This project is more than just a dam. It is an engineering marvel that symbolizes Ethiopia's aspirations for growth, energy independence, and economic transformation. A dam of epic proportions. Let's start by understanding the sheer scale of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. This $4 billion project is entirely funded by Ethiopians through taxes, bonds, and donations. Built on the Blue Nile in Ethiopia's Benishangul Gumuz region, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will create a reservoir capable of holding an astonishing 74 billion cubic meters of water. To put that in perspective, that's nearly the entire annual flow of the Blue Nile at this location. It's not just about size, though. It's about power. Literally, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will be equipped with 13 turbines capable of generating over 6,000 megawatts of electricity. This is enough to double Ethiopia's current energy output and make the country one of Africa's largest producers of electricity. For Ethiopia, where more than half the population lacks access to electricity, this project is more than just a construction project. It's a lifeline. It promises to light up homes, power industries, and potentially lift millions out of poverty. Economic potential, a game changer for Ethiopia. So why is this dam so transformative for Ethiopia? Let's break it down. By generating more than 15,700 gigawatt hours annually, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will provide reliable electricity to millions of Ethiopians and enable energy exports to neighboring countries like Sudan and Kenya. These exports are expected to generate up to $1 billion annually, money that can be reinvested into the country's infrastructure and social programs. The dam also promises to create jobs, around 12,000 during its construction phase alone. In the long term, it is expected to spur industrialization by providing affordable energy for factories and businesses, and it's not just about economics. The dam is also a win for the environment. As a renewable energy source, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam reduces Ethiopia's reliance on fossil fuels, helping the country combat climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, the dam's location in a narrow gorge minimizes water evaporation compared to larger downstream reservoirs, such as Egypt's Aswan High Dam. Sudan's double-edged sword. For Sudan, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam offers both advantages and challenges. On the one hand, the dam's ability to regulate water flow during floods and droughts could stabilize agriculture along the Nile, potentially increasing food security in a region that often faces shortages. It could also reduce the sedimentation that clogs irrigation systems, allowing Sudan to irrigate up to 500,000 hectares of new farmland. However, Sudan finds itself in a precarious position. While it stands to benefit from flood control and cheap electricity from Ethiopia, it is also worried about the dam's safety. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is located near Sudan's Rosaires Dam, and a failure at the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam could have catastrophic consequences downstream. Egypt, the Nile's nervous steward. Now let's talk about Egypt, a country where more than 90% of fresh water comes from the Nile. For Egypt, the stakes are incredibly high. Egyptian officials fear that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will reduce water flow downstream, particularly during the dam's filling phase or during droughts when every drop of water counts. Even a slight reduction in the water supply could devastate Egyptian agriculture, which is heavily reliant on the Nile. Some estimates suggest that losing just 2% of the water could result in 200,000 acres of farmland turning barren. That's a lot of lost crops and livelihoods. In response, Egypt has demanded legally binding guarantees from Ethiopia on how much water will be released during droughts. Ethiopia, however, views this as an infringement on its sovereignty. The two countries have been unable to reach a binding agreement, despite over a decade of negotiations mediated by the African Union and the United States. Egypt has even sought international intervention to pressure Ethiopia into compliance. The colonial legacy, a bitter pill. At the heart of the conflict lies a larger issue, the colonial-era treaties that granted Egypt and Sudan disproportionate control over Nile waters. These treaties were made in the 1920s and 1950s when Ethiopia was under occupation and had no voice at the table. Ethiopia argues that these treaties are outdated and unjust, asserting that they no longer reflect the reality of the region today. For Ethiopia, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam represents more than just a source of electricity. It is a statement of independence and a rejection of colonial-era agreements that have historically marginalized the country. This conflict over the Nile isn't just a diplomatic squabble. It highlights a broader issue of resource allocation in a region facing increasing water scarcity due to population growth and climate change. As more countries compete for dwindling resources, the stakes are only going to get higher. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam could either be a symbol of cooperation and shared development or a source of further division and conflict. Challenges and setbacks. Building a project of this scale isn't without its challenges, and the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has faced its fair share of setbacks. Originally slated for completion in 2017, construction was delayed due to mismanagement by Melek, a state-owned contractor accused of corruption. In 2018, Melek was replaced with more experienced contractors like Salini and Pregilo, and now WeBuild Group, helping get the project back on track. Despite these setbacks, the dam is now over 94% complete, with full operations expected by mid-2025. However, not everything has gone according to plan. The initial design called for 16 turbines capable of generating up to 6,450 megawatts of electricity, but due to budget constraints, only 13 turbines were installed, bringing the maximum output down to approximately 5,150 megawatts. Still significant, but lower than originally planned. The creation of the massive reservoir has also come with environmental costs. The flooding of nearly 1,900 square kilometers has displaced around 20,000 people in Ethiopia and submerged forests critical for biodiversity. Downstream ecosystems could also be affected by changes in water flow and sedimentation patterns. Climate change adds another layer of uncertainty, as altered rainfall patterns could impact water availability in the Nile Basin, affecting not just the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, but all countries that rely on the river. The diplomatic deadlock. Despite more than a decade of negotiations, no binding agreement has been reached. Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan continue to disagree on how the dam's operation will affect water flow downstream. This deadlock has left the region in a tense diplomatic standoff, with Egypt seeking international intervention and Ethiopia asserting its right to develop its own resources. As of late 2024, the fifth filling phase of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has already begun, and the reservoir is steadily rising toward its final capacity of 74 billion cubic meters. The question is, what happens next? Will the three countries find a way to negotiate an equitable water sharing agreement, or will tensions continue to escalate? A beacon of hope or a source of division? The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is more than just a piece of infrastructure. It is a symbol of hope for Ethiopia and a source of tension for Egypt and Sudan. For Ethiopia, it represents a bold step toward energy independence and economic development. For Egypt, it challenges the status quo of water control along the Nile, while for Sudan, it presents both opportunities and risks. Ultimately, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam could serve as a model for how countries share resources and collaborate on large-scale projects, or it could deepen divisions and create new sources of conflict. The hope is that it will become a blueprint for cooperation rather than division. A shining example of how nations can work together to address shared challenges in an increasingly resource-scarce world. And that's a wrap on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. What do you think? Will it unite or divide the Nile nations? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button and subscribe for more epic stories. See you next time for more fascinating discussions.